Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 7 must-start and must-sit wide receivers for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be going in-depth into my must-start wide receivers of the week at the beginning of the video, and then about halfway in, we're going to pivot into my must-sit wide receivers based upon their matchups for week number 7 of the 2021 fantasy football season. But before we can get on into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure to leave a like on today's video. It would help us out a ton. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 7 must start and must sit wide receivers for fantasy football in 2021. We begin with the must start category, headlined by Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the Atlanta Falcons at home in Miami. There were tons of questions, tons of people worrying last week about how Jaylen Waddle's play will change from with Jacoby Brissett to Tua Tagovailoa, and all of those worries, all of those questions were basically silenced instantly in the game by the play of Jaylen Waddle as well as the play of Tua Tagovailoa. Last week up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jaylen Waddle saw 10 receptions on 13 targets for 70 yards and not one but 2 touchdowns in that game, even with Devontae Parker returning to practice and likely suiting up on Sunday up against the Atlanta Falcons. That should not, in my opinion, at all affect your decision making on starting Jaylen Waddle or not. I am fine starting Jaylen Waddle whether Devontae Parker ends up playing or whether Devontae Parker ends up sitting in this week's matchup, because to me, he is not a push-pull factor for Jaylen Waddle for fantasy football production. Expect a healthy dosage of targets for Jaylen Waddle on Sunday, which could lead to a huge game up against the 30th ranked pass defense via DVOA. So expect a smash spot for Jaylen Waddle. I expect Tua Tagovailoa to look very good in this game up against the Atlanta Falcons, just as he did last week up against these Jacksonville Jaguars, because yet again, Jaylen Waddle and the Miami Dolphins are facing up against a cupcake matchup defensively this week with the Atlanta Falcons. My next must-start wide receiver is DJ Moore, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, going up against the New York Giants in New York this week. DJ Moore came out the gate of the season on fire, picking up 4 solid games to begin the season. As of recently, his production has fallen off the edge of the earth as he has failed to achieve 10 half PPR points 2 weeks in a row. Last week, he saw 5 receptions on 13 targets for 73 yards up against the Minnesota Vikings, so the high target share is still there despite DJ Moore not having the most productive last couple of weeks. If there was ever a game for DJ Moore to have that strong bounce back, to break free of the bad juju, the bad chakra that's going around DJ Moore, it would be this week up against the New York Football Giants, who last week got their back blown out by the LA Rams and Matthew Stafford, so expect a huge bounce back game coming for DJ Moore this week up against the New York Football Giants. My next must-start wide receiver is Hollywood Brown, wide receiver of the Baltimore Ravens, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals this week at home in Baltimore. Brown had a down game last week, and people are starting to feel a little bit nervous about Hollywood Brown, because throughout the first 2 years of his NFL career, he was one of the most inconsistent wide receivers in fantasy football. So it makes sense that based upon the last couple of seasons, that people might start to get a little bit nervous when we see Hollywood Brown have an inconsistent game. But what we need to look into is not his inconsistency from prior years, it's to look into last week's game, to whip out the microscope and really inspect what happened, to try to understand why Hollywood Brown may have had that bad game. And it was because this was a ultra run heavy game, even though most expected this game to be a back and forth toe for toe matchup between Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert. Everyone expected this to be a very pass heavy game, when instead the Baltimore Ravens kind of just ran all over the LA Chargers defense, and the Chargers couldn't stop it at all, so the Ravens were up by 1,000,000, not having to throw the ball at all, which is obviously going to lead to a bad game from Hollywood Brown, as well as the rest of the wide receivers on the team. Last week, in that matchup up against the Chargers, he had 4 receptions on 5 targets for 35 yards, so in my opinion, I don't think you should really panic on Hollywood Brown. I think you guys should go ahead and roll him out with supreme confidence going up against the Cincinnati Bengals this week. Do not panic on Hollywood Brown yet. He's had 2 down games on the season, season. But again, there are also the ultra highs that Hollywood Brown can get you week in and week out, which wins you your week with just one player using Hollywood Brown. So before we get into the must-sit wide receivers of the week, I would like to let you guys know that we have partnered with Yahoo Fantasy this NFL season to bring you guys some great offers. Check out our exclusive limited time offer, which gets you guys 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. To qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo, sign up for an account via the link in the video description, deposit, and play. That's it. Yahoo will send us your name after you played in your first paid contest, and we'll reach out to you guys via email with your coupon. If you would like immediate access because you want to play today, that is okay. All you have to do is email support@awesemo.com and we'll get you set up. You can also claim a free $10 below, which can be used to enter any Yahoo contest, including tonight's $100,000 Thursday Night Football Baller. Make sure to use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to help you guys win big. So make sure you guys do check out Yahoo. The link is down below in the description. The headliner of the must-sit wide receivers of the week is Tyler Lockett, wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks, going up against the New Orleans Saints at home in Seattle. Tyler Lockett has struggled mightily this season since the first 2 weeks of the season, because the first 2 weeks he was playing amazing. People were finally starting to see this consistency with Tyler Lockett, and Tyler Lockett basically slapped you right in the fucking face, forehand and backhand, for actually believing that this guy was going to be consistent. The struggle appears to have no stop in sight, as Geno Smith being under center makes things even worse, because at least with Russell Wilson under center, all it takes is one shot deep down the field to Tyler Lockett to make a bad game perfectly fine, and turn a bad game from maybe not just perfectly fine, a bad game becomes great, because Lockett catches that deep ball. But you match the bad quarterback play with the New Orleans Saints being the 9th ranked pass defense via DVOA. Lockett's probably best left on your bench this week, and probably going to be a must-sit player for the next couple of weeks unless we see him turn it around, or unless we see Geno Smith turn into a much better quarterback. My next must-sit wide receiver is Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver of the 49ers, going up against the Indianapolis Colts this week at home in San Francisco. A recent interview of 49ers general manager John Lynch shows that the team still believes in Brandon Aiyuk. And while that's all fine and dandy for John Lynch to go out there and say that, who really gives a fuck about what John Lynch thinks about Brandon Aiyuk? Because it is very evident that Kyle Shanahan and this offense do not want to use Brandon Aiyuk at all. They don't want to use him at all, and it is honestly sad, because in the first couple of weeks of the season, it appeared that Brandon Aiyuk was in some type of a metaphorical doghouse, and then he escaped said doghouse, but in reality, he didn't escape the doghouse. His head is just peering out of the doghouse. He's still kind of trapped in there. In the team's last game in week number 5, because they were on bye in week number 6 up against the Arizona Cardinals in that week 5 game, he had 2 receptions on 4 targets for 32 yards. He has yet to have a game on the season with over 6 targets, and things just seem to get grimmer and grimmer as the weeks go on. Deebo Samuel continues to be on an onslaught of these defense, and even with George Kittle out, Brandon Aiyuk is just nowhere to be found. He's doing his best Houdini, turning invisible. He's doing his best John Cena impression, where you can't see me, because Brandon Aiyuk has been invisible, irrelevant all fantasy football season, and at this point where we're sitting right now, week number 7, you might just want to cut the guy at this point. Final must-sit player of today's video is Tyler Boyd, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals, going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. When all of the 3 wide receivers are there, the big 3 of the Cincinnati Bengals, those being Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, you typically can't trust Tyler Boyd because he's the odd man out. Now, T. Higgins hasn't even been performing all that well recently, and even with that said, Tyler Boyd is kind of just chilling back. If Higgins or Jamar Chase were to get hurt, we don't root for injuries, knock on wood, then obviously Tyler Boyd would skyrocket up the rankings into being a must-start wide receiver, because any given week being the number 2 option in the Cincinnati Bengals offense is very, very lucrative for a wide receiver. Now, if you told me that 5 years ago, I'd tell you you're fucking crazy. But where we're sitting right now with how well Joe Burrow looks and how solid this Cincinnati Bengals offense looks, Boyd has value. But right now, with all of them in the game, there's really no reason to start Boyd, because like I said, even last week when T. Higgins wasn't playing too well up against the soft cupcake Detroit Lions defense, Boyd only had 1 reception on 3 targets for 7 yards. With all the Bengals wide receivers healthy, just make sure that you leave Tyler Boyd on your bench. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that like button down below as well. I would appreciate it a ton. I love each and every single one of you guys, and good luck this week in week number 7. As always, guys, goodbye.